Greetings and welcome out there in podcast land. This is David.
Hey, this is Tim.
Yeah, and you're listening to Johnny Has the Keys, a science fiction and horror podcast where two old friends, we get together, we talk about horror, science fiction, films, series, literature, what we think about them, and what they meant to us. And we'd love to hear from you too, so make sure you send us your thoughts. Make sure you like us on Facebook, review us on your favorite podcasting forum, and let us know if you agree with us or not. You know, what effect have these films and series had on you? What do you think about them? And get in touch with us. Email us. Go to the website. All that fun stuff that you can do to connect with us.
Yeah. David, I was just thinking, we never really talk about where we are broadcasting from. And I know you travel a lot. I'm assuming you're at home today.
I am. Yes.
Okay. And would you like to tell the listeners where that is?
But then they could hunt me down and find me.
Well, not specifically, no numbers, just
I'm. It's 555-1212. No, I am in lovely water-drenched East Tennessee right now, right at the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, and it is raining torrents here with flood alerts, and it's a lovely day.
yeah, I will say the same. We are in lovely, rainy northern Georgia.
Mm.
And it has been almost monsoonish at times.
Yes, yes, this has been a weird
Hmm.
season. Thank you, global warming.
Yeah.
So, yes.
But I just thought it'd be interesting for people to know that we're not in the same room. I'm assuming most people did know that, but anyway.
Well, hopefully we faked them all out, and by this time they think that we're doing this all, just facing each other across the interview table,
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
thing.
No, we actually live in a duplex.
Yeah,
I
that's
live
it.
next door and I come over here and we make shows together.
Yeah. Well, it's like, when you're in the same room with somebody and you end up texting them, saying, "Hey, could you
Yes.
bring me a Pepsi or whatever?"
Or please rescue me from this creep.
Yes, help me. But yeah,
Uh,
so what's been up? What's before we jump into the episode, which is a really cool one. But what have you been doing? What you been up to?
Not too much. I was trying to think of new shows. I'm still watching The Passage. I'm kind of nonplussed on it. I feel like they're dragging it out and that they kind of beefed it up for casting,
Mm.
whereas that's why it's not following the book as well. I don't know. I'm not going to give up on it, but not yet anyway.
Why don't they just follow the books? I mean, I don't understand.
Exactly.
I don't. There's
Yeah.
such great literature out there and such great stories, and just go for it. You don't have to change it to make it yours or whatever. I mean, so I agree with you.
Yeah. And some of these characters uh, don't play more prominently till the second novel, but it's like they want to go ahead and give them exposure in the first season of the show. And I'm like, wait a minute. Uh, it would have been so much more revolutionary if they'd just done the book because the book has a mind fuck in it uh, in like within 200 pages of its beginning.
Hmm.
So, and I don't think they're going to get to that this season. I really don't.
Really?
So, yeah.
Hmm. Well,
No.
I will have to catch up on the book. I have not read the book or the
Yeah.
sequel, and it's a trilogy, right? Or
It
just
is. I don't know that it started out that way, but it became that way after the success of the first one.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then the only other thing new that I can think of right offhand was I saw the trailer for the new Pet Cemetery movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
too. And speaking of not following the book, they kind of took some liberties there.
Yeah, and I was so surprised that they just blatantly did it in the commercial or the trailer.
I think they
I was
had
like,
to.
wow,
You know,
that's
I
a major change. Yeah,
but I don't
yeah,
think they could have shown some of the scares or teased at some of the stuff without giving it away. I don't.
no,
And I think they kind of want the acceptance. I read an article about it after I watched it, and the director was talking about they had written a couple of versions of the screenplay, and no matter how much they tried, all of the scares with the 3-year-old kid, Gage, just kept coming out like child's play. That's actually what he said. That was the quote. He said it just looked like we were trying to do child's play. And whereas instead, if you make the scares come from an 8 or 12-year-old girl, they can be a lot
Ellie.
creepier and eerier and everything else. And I thought, that's a pretty good. It's an interesting justification. I don't know if they'll pull it off or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, my first thought was, oh, it may have something to do with the child labor laws. It might have been easier to make the kid older, you know? I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Well, that probably helped a little bit.
Yeah. Have you seen King's endorsement of
I have not. Does he endorse it? Has he
it?
seen it?
The only thing I saw was a Twitter saying, I'm going to give you a warning. This is a scary movie,
Hmm.
or
Okay.
something to that. I'm paraphrasing. But a lot of people are now giving him flack because of how he disowned The Shining for changing his book, and now he's accepting this one that has changed his book.
There's that.
So
There's
there's,
that.
yeah, you got the haters out there all freaking.
If you augment one character, I think to but continue the normal plot, whatever, then I think that's better than. I mean, The Shining literally is a different story than what is in the book. It's just it goes in a totally different direction, I think. Um,
Yeah, kind of.
but remember, in the
But it's
original
great.
too, in the original Pet Cemetery, King did the screenplay, and it was different than the book. So there you go.
It was?
Yeah, remember the whole Pascal character and all that was not as big in the book as he was in the movie. You literally see him all through the movie, and yet in the book he's just like in the
He's
dad's
in a
head.
couple of scenes in the book. No, he's in a couple of scenes, but
Yeah,
they played him more comic in the movie, like dark comic,
yeah, that American
uh,
Werewolf in London kind of
kind of
humor.
like a
Yeah,
choral, like the chorus in a Greek tragedy, only funny and
yeah,
rotten.
yeah.
You know, corpses. Yeah,
Don't do
yeah,
that. Yeah. But I remember,
exactly.
I liked that version of Pet Cemetery. I didn't mind it at all, even with what's his name as the lead, who I thought was
Dale Midkiff. Ugh.
golly, pretty much a cipher. But I mean, it worked for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it had some great scares to it. I liked, Fred Gwynn.
He's great. Denise Crosby's good in it. She's a
Yeah,
little cold, but she's good in it. And she's supposed to be cold. She's cold in the book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I thought the first movie was actually pretty good. I rewatched it about 6 months ago.
So it'll be curious to see their take on it and how they,
Yeah.
redo it. If it's I don't know. Again, you know me. I'm the same way about reboots and remounts and da 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 da. I'm like, there's so much more out there and so many
Yeah.
other stories. So go for
Yeah,
them
there's a
instead.
plethora of stuff out there that's never been tapped. And it doesn't have to be new writers. You could go back to the 60s and pick people like we were talking about Theodore Sturgeon earlier. He's got plenty of stuff out there that's never been done.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Matheson, the rest of them. I mean, there's some great
right.
authors out there that redo. Even if you wanted to just, in your perfect genre world, even if you just wanted to do Stephen King, he's got volumes of stories that could be
Yeah.
turned into cinema. So it depends.
Well, and a
It's
lot of them are being snapped up.
yeah,
It's like, he's the gold mine all of a sudden again because he's on every media, well, every channel of television media and film media right now. I mean,
yeah,
it's like Netflix is snapping stuff up, Amazon snapping stuff up, CBS All Access, Fox. I mean, all these people are just
yeah. Because they're
grabbing
doing.
whatever Stephen King they can.
I think you had mentioned it already. They're doing Creep Show. Isn't that going to be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's on Shutter. It's produced by AMC, but it's going to be on the horror network Shutter.
Okay.
So you'll have to subscribe to that if you want to see that.
Yeah.
And I just read where End of Watch has been picked up by not End of Watch, excuse me. The Outsider has been picked up. That one I read earlier this year that I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was last year, but that's been picked up by HBO, and it's
Okay.
kind of an unofficial sequel to the Mr. Mercedes trilogy.
Which was on AMC or something like that, right?
No, that was on that weird AT&T thing that I still haven't seen.
Oh, okay.
You remember it came out? It was like I don't know if they're affiliated with DirecTV, but it's AT&T something.
Hmm. Okay.
Because I was like, how the hell am I supposed to watch all this stuff? I can't. I'm not gonna subscribe to everything.
Oh, I know.
Uh,
You have to end up with. I'm paying 3 times what I paid in cable just in all of these damn subscriptions.
right.
So, yeah,
I'll just buy it on Amazon or if it ever becomes available just to rent or whatever,
right.
I'll just do that.
Well, I saw Jordan Peele is doing the new Twilight Zone too.
I knew it was coming, but I didn't know he was responsible.
Yeah. So, and
Wow.
I loved his movie, so hopefully he can keep it going. But to our point, maybe he will. Maybe he'll do new stories rather. What I really would hate to see is suddenly we get a new Twilight Zone and all they do is remake old Twilight Zones. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
don't want to see Nightmare at 30,000 feet again or something. I don't want to see the demons come to Maple Street or whatever, just in a remake. I'd rather
Right.
see new stories, but we'll see what he does. And
I mean, I haven't seen his movies, but I know that he's gotten a lot of critical acclaim for the first one, which was
mm-hmm.
Get Out, right?
Yes, yep,
And then the second one is getting great reviews as far as being scary. And I've seen interviews with him where he's an admitted lover of the genre. So that means he probably knows it pretty well. So maybe he will pick some original new stories because obviously his films are original.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And I
good luck
miss
to him.
that. I miss that anthology horror, anthology science fiction storytelling anyway. Everybody's so into the arc world and, my season's got to have a continuing arc all the way through and blah, blah, blah. I even miss, what was that one that we watched when, in the 80s or not? The hit,
Amazing stories.
well, Amazing Stories with Spielberg, that was a little, except
It
for
was whitewash.
Mummy Daddy, which was a good one. But
God, I forgot all about that.
do you remember where they're filming the movie and he's a mummy and
Yeah, it's hilarious.
yeah, it's great.
I forgot about that.
But no, the Hitchhiker, wasn't that an HBO one? That was just a
The Hitchhiker was one. They had Tales from the Dark Side.
yeah.
Freddy's Nightmares. There
Yeah,
were
I mean,
several, and then they brought back Outer Limits. They brought back Twilight Zone.
yeah, I liked that
Um,
new Outer Limits. That was a good one. Those like 5 seasons or whatever it was. Those were really good. And they
yeah,
didn't do
that's kind of why I
remakes.
like Black Mirror because
Yep.
they're not trying to be those old shows. They're just doing their own thing. It's an anthology show, which is great. Um, but I have more respect for that because they just came out of nowhere and said, "Hey, we're going to do this again because we like it."
Yeah, and to me it's like the visual version of short stories. And
Hmm.
you don't have to have them connected. They don't have to have an arc. It's just we're in this moment with these characters doing this, telling this one campfire tale, if you if you wish, and then we're done, and that's it.
Yeah.
And like we said, go back. Urge you, if you're listening, Mr. Peel. I'm sure you listen to our podcast. Uh,
Oh, of course.
go
Doesn't everyone?
go seek out new authors or old authors and tell their stories already in print. Rather than just try to redo stuff that's been done. So there you go.
Right.
Speaking of trying to do something new with something old, and going totally against what we have been talking about, uh,
That was a nice
this
segue, though.
this particular episode of Johnny Has the Keys, we are still continuing our examination of The Haunting of Hill House, which was loosely, as they say, based on Shirley Jackson's novel.
Yeah, I like to say inspired by Shirley Jackson's
Ah,
novel.
yeah, that's probably a
Yeah,
better way of putting it. Yes.
yeah.
And unlike other episodes of this podcast where we essentially take a film and go all the way through it, we're actually approaching this series episode by episode rather than the entire thing. Uh, Warning, there will be spoiler alerts in case you haven't figured that out by now.
And
And
why would you be watching episode 8 of this series or listening
yes,
to episode 8 of this series if you haven't watched it?
and let's see. And you and I had watched the series when it originally aired, and now we've been revisiting it episode by episode, just kind of talking through
Mhm.
it and going through it, and giving it our kind of Johnny Has the Keys bent and storytelling. So, do you want to give us a little credit synopsis, whatever of this particular one?
Well, the episode title was Witness Marks, which to me was sort of an odd choice of a title, or at least not in line with the rest of the titles that we've been going with so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's we had talked about this earlier. You said it's a look more into the backstory. We're starting to see more of why these people are where they are and who they are.
Mm-hmm.
It like other episodes, it's going to go past, present, and it has a really great ending. I love the ending. I thought it was
Yeah, I
pretty
thought it was
snazzy.
some of the outstanding things of this episode, just as an overall for me, was I think it's interesting that the storytelling is telling more of the backstory as the family returns to the house, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it's kind of interesting that we're finding out more of the history as we get closer and closer. I actually liked the title mostly because I was unfamiliar with the term, and when it's actually explained in the scene near the end, I really liked that. I thought that was really cool what it meant and how it meant, and how it
Hmm.
reflects on the story. Um,
Hmm.
and I thought this was an interesting one because it doesn't have a lot of Flanagan's showiness that he's done in the past cinematography wise. So it doesn't have a lot of the intercuts that are cut by either a visual or a verbal. It has a couple, but not a lot. I think I think I'm correct, but I think Steve, little young Steve, is the only young character in this entire episode in the past.
Oh yeah, you may be right. I don't recall seeing any of the other kids.
I don't think there's any interaction with any of the other younger children. It's all so yeah. It's
It's
kind of
like
like
they've returned to Steve as the narrative of the episode.
yeah.
Um,
I totally
just like we were
agree.
talking about the kids being represented in each episode, and then finally Hugh in the last episode. Now they're back on Steve again.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is Steve's. I mean, because most of it's taken from either Steve or Shirley's point of view in this one, which is kind of interesting.
Hmm.
The two cynics, which kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're literarily telling the story, then why not take your two biggest cynics and see if you can convince them finally, sort of thing. So that's kind of, I think, the
You know,
approach he took.
I had not really thought of that till you just brought it up, but it does give some balance to the writing because you do have that happening with Hugh and Steve on one side and Theo and Shirley on the other.
Yeah,
It's kind of a balance of acceptance of both of them, just
yeah. Like the
separately.
last, the last part of the episode is just going back and forth between those two duos and how
Yeah,
they are each communicating with each other, and at least one person in the duo is completely opening up. And
yeah.
so I found that interesting.
And I'll go ahead and preface this. We won't go into it till we get to that part. But I had mentioned that in the last episode, my favorite soliloquy was by Mr. Dudley. But I forgot about Theo's soliloquy in this one, and it may be my favorite from this entire show. I think it was Emmy worthy.
I would agree. I concur with you.
Yeah.
I think it's
Okay.
probably the fourth monologue in this series that is just brilliantly done. Uh,
It's breathtaking.
yeah.
It just wears me out when I watch it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, let's break it down a little bit at a time and talk through it and see if we have any keys, if we think of anything, if anything comes up.
Okay.
We begin normal, or somewhat
Well, I don't know if
normal.
that's normal. They're in a fertility clinic.
We're in a fertility clinic in the semi-past, but not total past. And Steve and Lee are sitting there. Obviously, Lee is excited about let's get pregnant kind of thing. We can definitely see Steve is a little hesitant about that. Um,
Hmm.
we have our first sort of pseudo creepy moment in this episode when Steve is looking through the frosted mirror and shadows are moving by in the hallway, but then one seems to stop and get closer and closer and closer. Um,
Did that bother you?
did it bother me? Meaning, how do you
Well,
mean?
I mean, well, first of all, I wasn't sure who it was. It could have either been Olivia, I guess, or Nell. But what bothers me is, remember how we talked about this is the first time we've seen a ghost in like modern reality?
Mm-hmm.
But that was them at a fertility clinic a while back, and he's seeing a ghost. To me, it kind of was a little bit odd.
Yeah and no, I didn't think about it that much. Yeah, I guess in retrospect, it's maybe kind of a cheap dodge. It's kind of an easy creep factor scene rather than having some
A
kind of
little,
justification or logic.
I
Um,
thought it was a little out of context, if for lack of a better term. I was like, why is he seeing a ghost back when they were trying to get pregnant? Because
well,
we thought the first ghost he saw was Nell in his apartment.
but remember, Nell also saw Bentnick Lady all through her life. So,
Right, right.
so maybe this was, we don't know enough or not enough told enough about whether or not Luke in, heroin delirium saw actual ghosts and or whether Steve did in his adventures of debunking stuff. Maybe they have
Yeah,
been semi-haunted their whole life. Um,
yeah.
I think that
Maybe Nell was warning him, don't have children, don't have children. I don't know.
or saying, "Don't worry about it, Steve. It's fine. It's okay. Don't
It
whatever."
could be, yeah.
Uh,
I was just curious if you had any thoughts about that because it did seem a little bit out of context to me.
it did. I think it was it seemed a little bit too convenient for the moment. Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're right.
It's like let's juice up the beginning with a little scare,
Yeah,
or
we'll
something. Yeah,
tease you with a little suspense here.
yeah.
And then we cut from that to modern day. We're back at the funeral home.
Hmm.
It's the same night. Actually, it's the same. It's just a few minutes later. Shirley's trying to find out where Luke is. She's on the phone with the credit card company, all that kind of stuff, saying, we're trying to figure it out. Uh, and
Theo suggests suicide.
right, yes,
And then she asks her dad, "Are we not going to tell them what we just saw?"
yeah, and that
Which
brings
I
the
thought was
question for you:
interesting.
why not tell them? Why do you think Hugh didn't want to tell them?
Well, I mean, I guess in line with his character, he's kind of withheld that stuff the whole time. Um, his reasons, I'm not 100% sure of. It's whether he's protecting them or whether he's, trying not to seem like a lunatic to them. I don't know. I mean,
Hmm.
it's something to me, it's more natural for him to keep it from them than Theo because he's been keeping this shit from them for a long time
Oh
or
yeah,
trying to protect them from it.
even being estranged from them. I mean, and knowing it'll make
Hmm.
him estranged from them, he's had this. I was protecting you, which he
Right.
even says later on with Steve. And Steve even repeats him. He says, "What you always say, Dad, is you're not telling us because you're protecting us from it."
Yeah.
I did
So
get
that's
pissed in
my
this scene like normal because both Shirley and Steve are again just denigrating Luke the whole time and have no faith in him. They think he's just going to cop drugs and everything else. I feel so sorry for Luke. It's like my family doesn't like me at all. Uh,
You don't believe me.
you
My
know,
name is Neil.
all I wanted was for
I'm
you to
very
believe
sad.
me. um,
Vegetable rights and peace.
uh, we get to
So,
we
don't ask me where that came
I
from.
love it. That's a great tangent.
That is a deep dive into 1981's The Young
The
Ones.
young ones. Oh, we let's see. We jump from there back in time. Our first real jump to the past in this episode, and it's Dad still doing his cleanup. Steve wants to help, and he says, "No, you just go watch, your brothers and sisters and everything, because I'm still bleeding down here with this fan and all this stuff." I did notice. If you look at his hand, he's still bleeding. I'm going, dude, get
That
some
one,
stitches,
the
please.
one shot we saw of it from the last episode is gonna haunt us forever because it looked like it would hurt really bad.
Well, I know it was like hacked all the way to the bone, and then he's
It's
like
like his hand was like
cover
bisected almost.
cover it up with a compression bandage. You go, I'll be fine. It's okay.
Oh yeah,
I can fix it.
I don't need stitches.
Yeah.
Mm.
then so he goes, go take care of your brothers, and we get Steve walking through the house, all these workmen there. He walks by a guy fixing the clock and keeps walking, and we find out later, oh my gosh, that's a really important thing that we just probably didn't even notice, but there you go, which is great about that storytelling, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds Mom upstairs in the twins' room acting kind of creepy. You know, she's talking like the kids are there, and then when he says Mom, she turns around and gets scared and asks where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then just says, I'm fine, and, you know, shuffles away. So Steve obviously knows, you know, Mom's not feeling great. She's still
Well, and
acting.
this could be part of the reasoning that he has behind the mental illness theory that he keeps throwing at his dad too.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
because he saw shit like this when he was a kid
Yeah.
too.
He
Yeah.
saw the early stages of something, not knowing what it was, and his mind
Hmm.
says, you know, mental illness. We all have it, kind of thing.
Right.
Well, because later on, you know, it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but later on when he's talking with Hugh, he says something about like that explains the hallucinations I've been seeing recently. It's mental illness. You know, admitting that
Hmm.
he's seen stuff. So he's going back to that episode a few episodes ago where he saw Nell and everything else. So he's admitting he sees things. He just thinks that it's because he's crazy. But yeah, we cut from that to Stevie upstairs playing video games in the game room, and he looks over and sees a vanity covered in cloth and gets an idea. And we don't know what that idea is
Hmm.
because we now cut back to the first car scene, I guess, with Hugh and
Steve.
Steve.
Yeah.
You know, we've said it over and over as we're reviewing this series, but I think we both love the fact that this guy loves to tell stories um,
Hmm.
and examine the characters and their motivations more through storytelling than just statement. So we find out so much in this little monologue that Hugh gives about himself and Olivia and how
Hmm.
she's the kite and he's the line. You know, she's in the clouds, he's grounded. And he just opens up to Steve and tells, you know, several different stories of how much they cared about each other. And
Hmm.
you really see that paternal thing, I thought, you know? I mean, you really see he's trying to connect to Steve because doesn't he begin it with something like, so how are you guys doing? I noticed there's trouble with you and your wife or whatever. Um, so it's like he's trying to do the dad thing and counsel and say, don't throw this away and don't screw it up because he's giving an example of when he, you know, was separated from Olivia in the past and all that. And um, what did you think about that scene? Did you like that whole exchange?
I did. It reminded me a bit of my dad. Not that I've ever been in that situation, but traditional parents, I think, would want to preserve a marriage or save a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very noble effort on his part by offering that little allegory or whatever you want to call it about him and Olivia
Mm-hmm.
and saying, everybody goes through these things,
Yeah.
it's worth it to work it out.
Yep. Again, going back to that, you know, thing we've always said about this series is it's scary, it's creepy, it's moody, it's well cast and acted, but it's basically the family story that keeps you coming back. It's
Yeah,
these
it's
character
drama. Yeah.
interplays. It's the drama. So, yeah,
Hmm.
and I've got some quotes in here that I liked. Uh, Hugh says a couple of times, we were on the same team. So we just realized
Hmm.
we were on the same team, you know, and from then on out, that's what we did. We faced everything together.
I like when he says, "Whatever you need to fix, I hope you do."
Mm-hmm.
I liked that a lot.
Yeah, and Steve almost seems to listen in this scene. He's not sarcastic, roll his eyes, Dad, I hate you, Steve, which is good.
Or the male equivalent to Shirley,
Yeah, yeah.
which they're both just easy to not like
It's
at times.
so easy,
Yeah.
so easy. Um, we stay in the present. We cut from there to the funeral home, and Shirley's by herself, and
Hmm.
we get the
Isn't she on the floor with the broken house?
Yeah, yeah, and she picks up a piece and says that's odd and that's strange because it's got black all over it. And I didn't realize until a few scenes later that's like the black mold.
Exactly. I was like, what is that? And then
And
it dawned on me later.
me
Yeah.
too. I was doing the same thing. I was
Yeah.
going, why did she call that out? What's the point? Da da da.
Yeah.
Um,
I was like, that has to be there for a reason. And sure enough, I remembered later.
and right before that, though, there's that really quick scene with her because Kevin and the kids are going trick or treating, and she decides to stay home, and naturally because she's being Shirley the bitch. Uh,
She
but
is such a bitch.
but they
How can
say,
we talk? You'll be at the hotel.
"Oh God, I've
Or
got
whatever.
that." That was one of my favorite lines. I was going, "Golly, I hate her." Um,
Yeah.
and again, I've got to go back. I mean, I know it's good therapy, family writing sort of thing, blah, blah, blah. But she does know Theo's gay, right? Right? I mean, come on. It's just,
Yeah.
I just don't see getting that angry about it. Even if it was a
Hmm.
drunken slip up or whatever, excuse me, not the same preference range, just saying. So, doesn't really
Right.
matter. So, anyway, um,
But I always go back to that thing where where they joke about Shirley being the last to know, like at the wedding,
right.
she's the last to realize. I'm wondering if it's that same character trait that she's just not accepting of it because she doesn't want to believe it, or it's a part of that. She'll be the last to know, and she is the last to know when Theo
True.
finally tells her what happened. You
True.
know,
And then
I don't
there's
know.
I agree with that. It just seems but bizarre to me. I mean, I can understand maybe getting upset with hubby because, he's like maybe not being faithful or whatever, but it was just weird to me.
It is a little weird. It is. I mean, especially being a gay man, I can't imagine it happening with me.
Well,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
or yeah, it's just it was just
yeah.
odd
I'm
to
not gonna come after your wife, David. I promise.
right, and nor would I go, oh, were you hitting on my wife? I don't think so. Um, or you must have been really drunk.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, we cut to that back to Hugh and Steve, and now we suddenly have like Steve's answered all that, and he turns out to be our typical know him, love to hate him, pissed off Steve about everything. Because I've got lines in here like, "Oh yeah, Dad, just like you protected Mom." And he goes off on, describing Olivia and the body, and he saw the police reports and yada yada and all that kind of stuff. And he's just really,
It's intense. It's
yeah.
really intense.
And I like Timothy Hutton doing the Hugh thing of, so we're going to go there? We're going to do this?
Hmm.
Okay, all right, then fine, yeah. Um, and it was a good scene. I think it was strong. I don't think it really perpetuated anything plot-wise, but it was a kind of good scene between the two of them and showing that uh, showing a lot of Steve's resentments, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I like the way it ended. It ended with him saying, I miss my mom. And that was an honest moment. I thought that was really, really good for them.
And
Um,
didn't he say, "I miss her too"?
yeah, I think Hugh goes, I do too, every day or something like
Hmm.
that or whatever. Which is, okay, question. We do
Hmm.
not see Hugh's Olivia in this episode. And I thought that was either
You
an
mean nice Olivia?
yeah, nice Olivia.
Good Olivia. Yeah. Okay.
Supportive, encouraging Olivia kind of thing. Uh, and what do you think about that?
If you want to know from a creative standpoint,
Yeah.
I think it would have upset the balance of the two storylines because you have the father and the son in one scene and the two sisters in the other. To have
Mm-hmm.
that third party would have made those scenes weightier.
Mm.
Or not necessarily weightier, but maybe a little bit more awkward because I don't think she's necessary. I
Yeah.
think this is more about Stephen and Hugh.
And I thought that too. I thought maybe in these past two episodes where we've seen her, it's because Hugh is unsure and doesn't know what to do and doesn't know how to react, and so she's his support mechanism, encouraging him not to talk. Like when she was with Shirley, going, don't.
Right.
Yeah, but in
And that
this,
was great. And
yeah,
since they used that for comedy, they might have been afraid that her being there would have brought that back, and they didn't want that to be funny
right.
too.
Or in this episode, Hugh's making the decisions. He gets in the car and goes with Steve. He's calling the hospital. He decides to tell him all the stories. He's
Yeah.
the one that goes into the service station to find, so maybe he doesn't, his mind, I guess, doesn't need Olivia in this episode because he does know what he needs to do and is
Hmm.
doing it. So that might be a part of it too.
Yeah,
Um,
he's taking the wheel and he's driving now
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
more because well, we already know what happens in the final episode, and
mm-hmm.
maybe this is when he's already decided what has to be done, so he's taking the lead.
Oh, now I had not thought of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, you got to look at the
That might
big
be
picture.
something when we get to the last episode. That might be something for us to think about and see when Hugh made the decisions he makes. That's interesting.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we cut back to everybody's favorite housekeeper, talking
Mrs.
to
Dudley.
Mrs. Dudley,
Yeah.
talking to
Tell me about
Steve.
God, Mrs. Dudley.
Yeah.
I want to learn some more.
But Steve's obviously, shown the vanity to her and getting her opinion on what he should do because he wants to do something nice for his mom. Um,
Right.
and I do like how the scene starts because it's those kind of puzzles that we don't even know are puzzles yet for another episode.
Hmm.
Because he says, Mrs. Dudley goes, "It's beautiful. Where'd you find it?" He goes, "Upstairs in the game room." And she goes, "The what room?" And he goes, "Upstairs," and just keeps going. And us as original listeners go, "Yeah, okay, so what?" And then later on we go, "What?" So I liked that. Um,
Do you think, am I missing something, or was there a reason why a vanity was his choice? I mean, does Olivia have an affinity for vanities? I just thought it was just kind of a strange, or is she like antiques? I'm not really sure why the little boy would say, "I'm going to fix up this vanity for my mother."
well, it's a singularly female piece of furniture, for one thing.
Okay.
I mean, and he kind of, and or think about it the opposite too. He first saw it when he was in the game room,
Right.
and we find out in this scene that it was Poppy's. So maybe there was some, manipulation there.
I was going to say
Uh,
maybe there's a bit of trite storytelling going on to introduce another character.
well, there's that too, but
Yeah.
um, I didn't really mind it. I thought, yeah, a teenage boy sees a vanity, goes, "Oh yeah, I can give that to my mom. That's okay."
Right.
Uh, so I didn't
It's okay.
mind
I was just
that.
wondering if I missed something.
No, I don't think we've heard any reference to Olivia and antiques or Olivia saying, "Gosh, my bedroom would be complete if I only had a vanity," or
Or
something.
perhaps she was sitting in front of a mirror brushing her hair all the time or something, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
uh,
Okay.
but we find out a little bit of history here. Like we said at the beginning, this episode basically is getting into the backstory. And we find out about Poppy Hill, who was the wife of William Hill. And
Mm-hmm.
great, some good Gothic horror lines in this with the whole, "They fell in love in an asylum." I like that line. Um,
She was insane.
and
Is
so,
that the word she used? Insane?
yeah, and so was he. And it was
And
like,
Steve interprets that to be like radical or something, doesn't he? Or she tries to explain, no, really insane.
she has to go, "No, really, they were insane. They were crazy."
They met and
Um,
fell in love in the asylum.
yeah. And okay, a key. Like I'll throw a key out here. As soon as she said that, the first thing that came to mind was it was like a reverse Freddy Krueger. It was
Oh,
to me because it was like I don't know why. I guess because she was happy in the asylum. Freddie was not happy. in that kind of uh, crazy nunnery or whatever. Wasn't he in an asylum? Wasn't Freddie in an asylum? Uh,
He was he was born of 1,000
Nuns
maniacs
or
that raped
something. Yeah.
some nun or something. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
he wasn't there, but it was like he was born from a nun that was raped
Right.
by crazy people
Because
or
he was
something.
like the
Yeah.
custodian or something, or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
got a little key that I'll go ahead and toss out here now because I don't have a lot of keys.
Yeah.
And this is really not a key, and this is deep diving almost as deep, if not deeper, than the young ones in 1981.
Hmm.
Um, this story she tells of William and Poppy meeting and falling in love in an insane asylum harkens back to a 1978 album that Alice Cooper did called From the Inside,
Mm.
that is about an insane asylum. And there is a song on there called Millie and Billy, and it's about two murderers, one that chopped up her husband and put him in little plastic baggies, and they fall in love in an insane asylum. And
Nice.
as soon as they told that story, I was like, this guy's an Alice Cooper fan. He has to be.
Very
Because
nice.
yeah.
That's a
So
good
that's a
one.
key, but it's an off key. It's
It's
off key.
yeah. It's a B flat. Uh,
It's a D flat.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So
Uh,
I had to put that in there. So
well, we learned, like we said, we learned a little bit about Poppy. We learned a little bit about that, which I thought was good, and it wasn't done in a haunting way. It was just done in oh, by the way, they were crazy. Yes.
hmm
And then we have Steve painting it, and he sees the
hmm
mold on the bottom, which is when I went,
right.
oh yeah, that's the mold from the Forever House. I get it now.
Yeah. And that's a really stark metaphor for, I guess, the evil or the decay that this house is bringing on everybody or whatever.
Yeah, maybe it was the
Including the
original.
model of Shirley's Forever House or whatever. It's reaching that far.
Yeah, it's reaching that far. So yeah, I
hmm
yeah. Um, we next scene we're back in the funeral home. Shirley by herself again. More the doorbell ringing and knocking. Um,
I love all that stuff. I mean, that's classic horror movie stuff to me. And I couldn't remember if we mentioned it in the scene prior, but I love that she thinks it's trick or treaters and she's just getting pissed off. And every time she goes out there, there's nobody there. And I'm like, ooh, girl, there's some, what is it? Oh, Molly, you're in danger, girl.
yeah, yeah. It's a classic trope of
Yeah.
and I've got that as a key or a couple of like dual reference keys. I remember an interview years and years and years ago with Darren McGavin from Night Stalker,
Oh, yeah.
and he used to do one man shows and everything else. And
Speaking of anthology-like series,
yes, that's a good one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and he was talking about, and I don't know if he originated it, but this is the first time I heard it. And then since then, I've heard it in several other different variations. But the whole trope of scary is not something jumping out at you. Scary is sitting at home reading a book and you hear a knock on the door and you go to the door and open it. No one's there. You close the door, go back and sit down. As soon as you sit down, you hear the knocking again. That's
hmm
scary. And I remember King used that story in a prologue, I think, or a forward in a book once. And that's what this is. It's a classic trope of, oh my gosh, nobody's there, but somebody's there.
And you
Um,
heard Darren McGavin use that
yeah,
analogy?
yeah.
What was he talking about? That's weird. I
He
mean, I know he
actually
was in a scary show, but
he actually was doing it as part of his one man show. He
oh,
acted that out and did that and told that whole analogy of that's what real scary is. Scary is what
yeah,
we make scary in our mind. Scary is what we imagine, not what we literally see in front of us. And
yeah.
uh, I think this did that well and built on it because we go from Shirley doing that to suddenly Theo is there. Not suddenly, but she runs into Theo and they have their fight, argument, scream at each other kind of thing. Um, and a little side humor there because she punches her in the boob. And
That is hilarious. Did you
well,
just
and
punch
their
me in the boob?
reactions are what made it work. I mean, the actress playing Theo's reaction and then Shirley's and the way Shirley went and she goes, "Did you just punch me in the boob? And there's that huge
Yeah.
pause, and Shirley goes, yeah, that's right. That's what you get when
You
you
know
try
what?
to sleep with my husband. You get punched in the fucking boob.
It's almost like a way of transitioning into the past without transitioning into the past. It's all of a
Hmm.
sudden like they're little sisters again fighting.
Yes. I thought
Yeah.
that exact same thing. And it's that moment of levity before suddenly bang, 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 bang. It comes
Hmm.
back. Um, and this time
Yeah.
it builds. So this time, a key to me was definitely Poltergeist. A key was definitely the original Hill House. But the whole, uh, and a key,
Banging.
and a key reference back to even the first episode of this, because they're the two little girls in the room while the walls are being banged on.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So it, to your point of let's go back to when we were kids, that's, they literally do that kind of. Um,
So, are you saying it's an incestuous key?
oh,
Because it's a key within its own series?
it's a key that unlocks its own box,
Dare you
sort of thing.
say?
Um, and it was good. I thought it was a good scare. Um, I think continuing in the present in this was kind of cool. Rather than cutting back to Stevie here, we suddenly go back and forth between this duo, like you said, this duo and the guy duo, because Shirley gets a text, and it's that Luke has used her credit card at a gas station, and so
Right.
everybody in the family immediately knows where he's going, and they don't say
Hmm.
it yet, but you can just see in the way all of them react that they know.
Yeah.
Um, and Theo, again, going back to like herself in an earlier scene, Shirley, she goes, tell them. Aren't you going to tell them what just happened? And Shirley doesn't. Just like, are we not going to tell Shirley and Steve what we just saw? Oh, I guess not. Okay,
Hmm.
great, fine. But we cut from them back to the guys, and this is where we get the whole reasoning behind the original scene in this episode, which is now we know why. Now we know why Steve and his wife Lee are having trouble. We know what his motivation and reasoning is, uh, whether that's correct or not. But the fact that he says he's never having kids because right out of college he had a vasectomy because he didn't want to be like, he didn't want to spread the craziness, I guess.
Right.
Um,
And that's like major. I mean,
yeah,
that's major deception going on. I mean, that shows Steve is really kind of fucked up.
yeah. I would question that more than question his sanity on seeing ghosts.
And is
Because,
Luke's addiction really worse than that?
ooh, good point. I mean, even because Hugh even says, "Wait, you did this, but before you met Lee, and you've never told her?" It's like,
Yeah.
holy crap, dude! Talk about secrets in the closet. That's like
Well, and it's
bad.
not only, I mean, it's not only him lying to her by not telling her, but I mean, he's letting her go through all this. So she's thinking it's potentially her.
Right, right.
I mean, that's not right. I mean, that's just bad.
Yeah, yeah. That's some messed up selfishness there.
Yeah,
To be
no doubt.
that. To be that. But again, let's flip it from the other side. Maybe it is, it shows the fact that was so traumatized and so scared of what happened that he didn't want to spread it. He doesn't want it to go anywhere else. He's actually a
Hmm.
little bit of a Hugh there, saying I'm protecting my kids because I'm going to make them non-existent. They're not from this happening. Um, so we
I'm trying to find where I'm at.
we cut from there back to little Steve. Now we're in the past,
Is
and
this
he
where
finally
Theo
gives it to
tells
his mom.
Shirley that this is not the only weird shit that's been happening or whatever? Or was that right before
That's
when they
coming
leave?
next. That's coming in the next
Okay.
scene. Because we cut back to little Steve. He presents it to her, and naturally she does the freak out and smashes the mirror and acts really freaky, which reinforces, I think he's trying to, storytelling wise, he's trying to reinforce Steve's motivation by saying he saw
Hmm.
his mom really crazy. So
We missed a line of mine that I loved,
Oh,
by the
yeah, go
way.
ahead.
Um, I guess it's when Dad and Steve are finally right before the vasectomy revelation. He describes Theo as a clenched fist with hair.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. That is a good
I was
line.
like, that is brilliant.
That
This
is
is
very well
great.
done. Um, so then we
Sorry,
cut.
I didn't mean to
No, that's
digress, but I
great.
had lost my place in my notes and I was trying to find it.
That's great.
Um,
We cut back
then he
to.
gives
Go ahead.
Olivia the bureau or the vanity. I keep calling it a bureau, but it's a vanity.
Hmm.
And she loves it. And what does she do?
Punches it.
Yeah, she punches it.
Yeah,
She smashes the mirror with her fist, which had to hurt,
and then goes,
but it's
"Honey,
so
I'm
bizarre.
sorry. I'm sorry." Yeah. So he's seeing mom in not the best light, so to speak.
Right.
And then we come back to probably my second, well, yeah, my second favorite scene in this episode, which is the back in the car with Steve and Hugh
At the gas station.
after the gas station. So they do the gas station.
Oh, after. So you're talking about after he gets the cans. I
Yes,
mean, after Hugh comes out and says, "I'm driving,"
right, right.
which
And
I
he was,
think I alluded to earlier in a metaphorical sense, but now he literally is driving.
yes.
Yeah.
And he even said, look, Steve goes, wait, it's my rental. And he goes, yeah, I'm driving. Yeah. But we get the whole story. So basically, this is the first time in, what is it, 18 years, however long it's been since Olivia's death, that Hugh actually starts talking to Steve about the reality of it.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved it. We get the whole thing about um,
There
he,
was no clock repairman. There was no treehouse. All
yeah.
this shit that Steve thought was real was only in his head.
And we get the reason for that is the title of the episode because it's the witness marks. And he even
Hmm.
says you're seeing the marks, but you don't know how to read them. You've never known how to read them. And like the treehouse and like the clock repairman. And he has that great one of my lines that I like from this is, "Our family is like an unfinished meal to that house." I thought that was a cool line. And he
That is a
talks
good line. That's a great line.
and how the fact that all of them are in danger by going there, but especially anybody who tries to attack the house, which is what they know Luke
Hmm.
is going to do because he bought 5 gallons of gasoline. Um,
Hmm.
and so
But
that
doesn't
line,
he say Stephen is the worst or most vulnerable or something?
yeah, he said actually more so for you, Stephen, because of everything you've written
Right.
and because of the way you wrote about the house.
That's it exactly because the way you wrote about it, as if
So
it
yeah,
wasn't real.
the house will take vengeance, on you or whatever. Um, and And then, so that was witness marks and what they are. So for those of you who haven't watched the episode, why are you listening to us if you haven't watched the episode? But witness marks are the little scratches and indentations made inside a clock mechanism from various tools and times where people have repaired it or fixed it or maintained it. And you have to know how to read them in order to know the history of certain things. And I thought that was a really good parallel. So now we know why. So in going back to your first reference, I think that was a great idea for the title of this. Um,
No, it is. But what I meant was that it didn't follow the theme of scary titles, like Chief
true. Oh yeah.
Storms
Steven
and
sees a
Bent Neck
ghost.
Lady.
Yep.
Yeah, all of a
Yep.
sudden
Yep.
there's one called Witness Marks, and it sounds like it's a crime procedural or something.
Yep. NCI
So,
haunting. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't say it wasn't appropriate. It just seemed a little bit out of line with the formula as far as the titles go. But
And then we cut to Theo and Shirley driving in the car because we allude to it
ah,
because he goes, "That's why I told your sisters to stay back there." And Steve goes, "You really think they will?" And then it cuts to them in the
right,
car, which I thought was a great cut.
yeah, family emergency, man. Everybody
Uh-huh.
on board.
Everybody on deck, let's go. Um,
Yeah.
and
Do you want
they,
to talk about the elephant in the room first?
no,
Shall I
yeah,
say
go
the
ahead.
elephant in the back seat?
Yeah. um,
Well, it's just, it's a really well paced scene because you've got tension mounting. You've got
Mm-hmm.
them in a car speeding in the rain, and they're fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and it's building to something. However, you don't know what it's building to, because what really the climax is really after the car is already stopped and they're outside of it. But
Right.
there's a moment right before then during their argument where there's a jump scare, and a lot of people hate it, but it's Nell just all of a sudden comes bursting out of the back seat in between them and screams. The ghost of
Mm-hmm.
Nell, I should say.
Yeah.
And it forces Shirley. Is it Shirley that's driving, or Theo? I can't remember.
Shirley's driving. Yeah.
I think it's, yeah. It forces Shirley to swerve off the road, and Theo just gets out and starts running and collapses. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I guess what I was going to say before we get to Theo, what do you think of that jump scare?
Oh, it got me. It got me even on the second time looking through it. It's just paced really well. It is that typical jump scare, literally.
Well,
Because she
it's not an anticipated jump scare though, because it's
no.
completely out of the blue. It's that one that Alfred Hitchcock talked about with the bomb under the table just blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know the bomb's there. All of a sudden, everybody's just obliterated, and
Yeah.
it's very, very shocking.
And I think it'll be known as one of the ones of, one of the scares of this series. I think a lot of people will refer to it that way.
Yeah.
Because it's very memorable. It works very well. It leads up to that monologue of Theo's, which is just phenomenal. Uh,
Well, and the two things that I like the most about it is that from the start of the scene where they're driving through Theo's monologue, which is just heart wrenching at the end, the pacing, like you said, is flawless. And
mm-hmm.
that little pow with that jump scare is almost like, I don't know, a drum or something in a Bernstein symphony. I mean, it's like a pow. And then all of a sudden the car swerves, you've got the squeaking, she gets out and runs, and it continues. It's not over.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a piece of it. But I also like, I have to say one other thing. I also like the fact that it's because they're fighting and Nell is like, stop fighting.
Right.
She is like, she wants to, you two need to make up because I need you together to see this through the end.
Yep.
And
Still
I think
trying to keep
that's
the
another
family
reason why
together.
it's there.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Love it.
So,
And that's a
so
brilliant
those are my two
performance.
biggies.
Brilliant performance by Theo. Um, Talking about
Kate
the whole
Siegel.
motivation for the whole thing with Kevin and why it all came, and it was just very well done, very well written as well.
Yeah.
Um,
When she's talking about the emptiness,
yeah, it felt
isn't it?
nothing. Yeah,
And nothing, feeling nothing, and it's just it's I don't know, it's worthy of an Emmy to me.
yeah, I agree.
It's worthy of actors auditioning, monologues to audition with. It's just that good.
Mm-hmm. That's a brilliant choice too. Yeah, I agree with that.
Hmm.
We cut from that to essentially the final scene, which is now we're at Hill House. And we see it all decrepit and boarded up and everything else. The Jeep pulls up to it. Luke gets out. He's not got a smile on his face at all. And I liked the pacing of that, of showing him looking at the house and just staring at it and staring at it. Cut back to, behind it, and suddenly the house lights up and just, it greets him kind of thing,
Yeah.
which I loved. I thought that
Doesn't
was
it light
awesome.
up more red too
Oh,
than
yeah.
it normally
Very
does?
red.
Yeah.
Very red. And I think it's the same red as Nell. I'd like to go back. I should go back and look at that. I think it's the same red that Nell saw when it lit up for her when
Uh-huh.
she was on the phone. Um, and he goes in, spreads all the lighter fluid, all the gasoline, throws a lighter on it. After he counts to 7, by the way. I thought that was cool. He does count to 7 twice. Um, Throws the Zippo a blue flame and then nothing. And he's got the same expression we have, which is, okay, just saw him pour all that gasoline. What happened to it? Where'd it go?
Uh-huh.
um, and then we get the ending. We get he looks up, sees his mom at the top of the steps, looking all beautiful in her red
But
gown
you
and
know,
everything.
I
Um,
don't think it's good Olivia though. It looks like evil Olivia to me.
well, it is.
She's in. Isn't
It's
she in red?
it's smiling Olivia in red. Yes. So we don't know.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I don't think it's definitely Hugh's Olivia. I think it is
No.
the time to wake up Olivia. If we want to, give some foreshadow to next week's episode. Um,
Right.
and then in the final shot, we cut back and we see a figure behind Luke, obviously in the 20s sort of figure with her little hairdo and hat, and grabs his by the face, and we cut to black.
It's
And
Poppy.
it's Poppy. And I hope we infer that. I'm hoping I'm not inferring that because I have seen the next episode, um,
Mhm.
but we should assume that it's at least one of the ghosts that has
Mhm.
now attacked Luke. So the last scene did bode one logic question to me. How did the house prevent the gasoline from going up? I don't. I don't have an answer for that.
I don't either, and I'm assuming that he actually did put gasoline in the cans because it would have been kind of weird if he was filling them up with water and was unaware of it or something.
Yeah, no, they would
Um,
have to change
because I mean, he
you
would
know,
have been at the pump, and the guy at the store would have noticed if he did something different.
yeah. I mean, I think
You
they would
know?
have had to change the laws of combustion, kind of thing,
Yeah.
to do that, um,
Hmm.
because it
Now,
does, flame out in blue a little bit, but then it's gone. So uh,
yeah.
I don't know how manipulative this house can be, but obviously that's a pretty big step to.
Well, and if you want to go to one of my constant keys, I love how I keep coming up with these terms. Constant keys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the whole burnt offerings thing, I mean, that house was strong enough that it rejuvenated itself every year. It shed its exterior and a new
Mm-hmm.
one came out. So maybe this house, since it's been around that long and it's that strong with whatever spiritual evil energy it has, it could squelch a fire.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's like you're not going to burn me down, motherfucker.
and
Um,
and we overthink things sometimes. I mean, it could have been just an effects decision that they could have fixed. If he had tossed it, we had seen a little blue, and then suddenly there'd been wind everywhere. Then
yeah.
I would have bought it more that the house can physically conjure wind, since it does seem to push people and move people and everything else. Then it just suddenly, things don't catch on fire here,
Hmm.
sort of thing.
We've
But
also spoke. We've also spoke where evil Olivia is kind of a representation of the evil in the house or whatever, or a
uh-huh.
manifestation of the house's evil. So it
Yep.
is kind of cool that she's the one that appears right after it. So she's like the one, no, not letting you do that.
Well, and
She's at the top of the stairs.
yeah, and I remember the first time I watched through this episode too, thinking, who would he want to see other than Nell, who he thinks is dead? Who would he
Right.
want to see as representation of this house? And who does the whole family associate with the house? Because it's the last time they saw her. So I think Olivia is a great, I guess, icon for Hill House. Um, and whether or not that's benevolent or not, we don't know at this current time. Um, but we know that Luke's definitely not happy about the house. Uh, and I think it's a good tease. Especially the hook at the end to suddenly grab him by the face and we go to black and we're like, oh my God, now I got to watch the next
Well,
episode.
yeah,
You
I
know?
mean that is I'm trying to come up with another key term, but that's one in a million keys of just the crazy ending that you don't expect because something jumps out at the end or whatever,
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
could
And
I could
and
name a
those
million of them. Nightmare on Elm Street, any of them.
and those hook episodes, whether it's a chapter in a book from King or whether it's an episode
Oh
of a
yeah.
series like this where they, the very last like 3 seconds is something you go, oh my God, now I got to turn the page
Hmm.
or I got to keep reading. I know it's 4 a.m., but I can skip work tomorrow. I've got to read this, or whatever. Uh, But overall, I mean, it's not a standout episode to me from a visual or a writing standpoint, but it is a very good episode and much better than a lot of other television out there. Um, I think we both agree that we love Theo's monologue. We also, I think, like Hugh's monologues too, the two that he does. Um,
Mhm.
and overall, it does propel the story. We're giving a few teases for setting up. Essentially, we're coming into the home stretch for the series. We've got 2 episodes left, and we're coming down to it, kind of thing.
Right.
And
Um,
I liked his plotting of, like we said at the beginning, we're finding out a little bit more of the history of the house, the history of Mom, and what happened at the same time that we're all rushing to the house for the first time
mhm.
in 18 years or whatever, which is
Yeah,
cool.
I don't. I mean, I I have trouble rating episodes in a series. I think it's a strong episode. I think most of the episodes are strong. I don't know that it's the strongest, but I
Hmm.
mean, all of these episodes have elements that make them super. And like you said, that monologue with Theo, when she just finally lets it out, I'm like, I was just devastated by that. And to me, that took it up, 3 notches right there.
Hmm.
Um, the returning to the house at the very end is another, monumental piece. You know,
Hmm.
Luke's there and he's got gas. What's going on? Um, as far as keys, if we're leading in that direction, I don't have a lot. I wrote that Alice Cooper one down because I couldn't resist. It was just there.
Hmm.
But one of the key, I mean, the main key I have is the continuing key from the last episode, and it's that story of the tragic family and the fall of the House of Usher and Edgar Allan Poe,
Yep.
because Steve keeps alluding to the fact that they're a cursed family. He's gone as far as to have a vasectomy, we find out, so that he doesn't reproduce because he doesn't want it to continue. And I just kept thinking, this is so Poe. I mean, it's so modern, but so Edgar Allan Poe, which is not modern at all. It's just
Yep.
bizarre to me. And I love the tie. I think it's great. I mean, we were just talking about at the beginning of this episode how, you can find original material out there and it doesn't have to be new. You can go back several decades. Well,
Hmm.
these guys are going back to Edgar Allan Poe. So,
Yep. So true.
yeah.
Uh,
Did you have any other keys?
no, those 3 were mine that I did, and I just again, we don't. This doesn't fall into total criteria for the podcast because we don't have a lot of keys for this because it hasn't influenced anything yet. I think you and I both agree it will. I think this will have some influences on television in the future, especially. Um,
Well, and we've also talked about how most of the keys that we have found have been to either past ghost stories, whether in film or in fiction.
hmm.
But we're also, I mean, even though it's episodic, it's really just one giant piece. So it kind of makes sense that as we're getting toward the end, there aren't as many keys
Yep.
because we're on the same story. And that being said, I will throw a peripheral key at you just to close us out a little bit if you want a little
Sure.
bit of humor. You brought up Darren McGavin
Yes.
and the Night Stalker.
Hmm.
What's a big key for that series?
A big key
Yeah. What
from
did Darren McGavin and the Night Stalker inspire?
the remake that they did in the 2000s. That was terrible. I don't know what X Files.
A very young child named Chris Carter who went on to do the
X
X
Files.
Files and
Yeah.
cast Darren McGavin in an episode.
Of course he should. As well he
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
a good
that's a
one.
peripheral key. There's another term for you, a peripheral
So we've got
key.
internal, personal, peripheral. We got lots of cool key
Black keys.
derivations. The black
Yeah.
keys. Okay, well, I think that will do us for this episode. We're so glad you guys listened to us and tuned in. Please write to us, review us, like us, all the good things on that. And Tim and I
And if
will,
you hate us, don't hate us too hard, okay?
yeah.
Please.
And Tim, we'll talk at you next week.
All right. It was great talking to you.
You too, buddy.